While in Israel, thousands have rallied in Jerusalem to demand a deal to free the hostages from Hamas's captivity and end the war in Gaza. In Jerusalem, Israeli protesters rallied near the residence of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Families of hostages and Israel anti-war groups called for a three-day protest in Jerusalem, culminating on Friday, which will be the 700th day since Hamas launched its unprecedented attack on Israel on October 2023.
We came today to stop the plan to conquer Gaza. It's very simple. Why? Why would Israelis want to stop the occupation of Gaza, if anyone ever asks? Because we are tired of hostages being murdered as a result of military operations. We are tired of civilians, friends, and soldiers being injured, suffering from post-trauma, hospitalized, and killed, all without any clear goal.
It's impossible to go on any longer. It's simply impossible. We've already lost 900 soldiers. Dozens of hostages were killed in Gaza and returned in plastic bags because of decisions you made, Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu, because of the management of a war that has lost its direction. I've been waiting 700 days for you to bring my child out of hell, and it is in your hands. I could see Matan as soon as tomorrow with a single choice of yours. But instead of seizing the agreement on the table for a comprehensive deal, you're ignoring it. You're choosing to keep sacrificing them, to give up on them. The military pressure endangers the lives of the hostages, who are enduring the most horrific physical and psychological conditions we could ever imagine. It also jeopardizes the possibility of bringing back the fallen with honor.
Well, joining me now to discuss this is Israel's ambassador to Nigeria, Freeman. Michael, glad to have you join us.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here.
Well, just like you had there, what do you make of the pressure, both at home and abroad, for Netanyahu to focus on getting the deal across, which Hamas has accepted, rather than furthering his political dynasty?
Prime Minister Netanyahu is determined, like all Israelis, to bring back our hostages and to end this war. Hamas have not yet agreed in any meaningful way to end the war. They have made very nice public statements, but those statements aren't real. They are part of Hamas's game. And as you said in your report, this war started when Hamas invaded Israel on the 7th of October, stole away over 250 Israelis into Gaza, where they held them hostage. There are still 48 remaining there. They murdered, raped, tortured, butchered Israeli citizens. And we will continue until we get our hostages back. And at this point, Hamas have refused in a serious way to end this war, to enter into negotiations. Our demand is very simple. Release the hostages and lay down your weapons, surrender, and the war is over.
Well, Israel's military chief of staff says, we have entered the second phase of Operation Gideon's Chariots to fulfill the objectives of the war. And the question many are asking, really, is what is the objective of this war?
Well, I think the objectives are very clear. It's the return of our hostages. 48 people are still being held by Hamas in their terror dungeons, being starved, being tortured, being abused. We want our hostages back. And we want Hamas to lay down their arms and never be in a position to carry out October the 7th again. Those are our aims and our demands, and they're very clear.
And the question is, at what cost? The cost of innocent lives and women and children who have no business with this war at all, Michael.
Look, it's the death of any innocent is a tragedy, and it's not something we want. This is not a war we wanted. This is not a war we started, and we're doing everything we can to avoid civilian casualties, whereas Hamas, on the other hand, are doing everything they can to increase civilian casualties. We know that Hamas are using children and are using women as human shields. They are holding them, they are fighting from behind them. Hamas are fighting from in hospitals, they're fighting from within schools, they're fighting from within mosques, they're fighting from all sorts of places that mean that they are embedded within a civilian population. Their terror tunnels are underneath the buildings inside Gaza. And so when we fight, unfortunately, as in any war, civilians die. There's never been a war in history where civilians haven't died. And this is a tragedy. It's terrible. My heart goes out to all of those innocents. But this could end tomorrow if Hamas were to release the hostages and lay down their arms.
Hospitals that say women and children were among more than 30 Palestinians killed in Israeli strikes on Wednesday, most of them in the north and the west. Doesn't this bother you? Where is the milk of human kindness in all of this?
Of course, every innocent death bothers me. It upsets me. But I think we need to remember a couple of things. Firstly, the figures you're quoting are figures from Hamas, and we know that Hamas lies, and we know that the Hamas figures they put out are completely inaccurate, and we know that they in no way distinguish between terrorists and between civilians. We know that they make up their figures. We know that there have been more than history of that. And we know that Hamas are deliberately hiding behind the civilian population. If Hamas genuinely cared about their civilians, if they genuinely cared about the Palestinians in Gaza, they would release the hostages and they would lay down their arms and the war would end. These pictures are heartbreaking. These pictures are terrible. But the reason they're there is because of Hamas. Hamas needs to lay down their arms. Hamas needs to release the hostages and the war will come to an end.
All right. These are Israeli protesters that took part in what they called a day of disruption to press their government to immediately agree a deal that would end the war in return for the release of all 48 Israeli and foreign hostages in Gaza. These are Israelites protesting. I mean, you listen to that woman who is an Israelite, who has a son there, and some others who are saying, let Netanyahu, your prime minister, accept the Hamas deal and get the hostages back.
Well, I think there are a couple of points here. Firstly, we don't know that there's really a Hamas deal. Hamas are very good at making headlines and making statements. And then when you actually go into not even the fine print, you go to the second line, you realize that there's not really a deal there. That Hamas demand to stay in power, they demand to keep their weapons, they demand to be able to keep rearming and to carry out another October the 7th. And so there's not really a deal there. But I know that Prime Minister Netanyahu wants this war to end. He wants this war to end with the defeat of Hamas. He wants this war to end with the return of our hostages, with Hamas not in the position to carry out ever again October the 7th or a similar style attack. And whilst all of these parents and people are protesting, there are also people protesting saying, keep going in the war, keep going until we defeat Hamas militarily. But ultimately, this is in the hands of Hamas. If Hamas want this war to end, then they need to release the hostages and lay down their weapons. And that is the quickest and the most immediate way to end the war. We don't want this war to go on. We don't want to be in Gaza. We didn't want this war. We didn't start this war. But unfortunately, we have to finish this war, and we have to finish this war to make sure Hamas can never do what they did on October the 7th again.
The question, at what cost? But the commentary is that Israel is trying to relocate Gazans against their will out of their ancestral land through the back door.
That's absolutely not true. We've got no intention of forcing anybody to leave Gaza. The Prime Minister's made that very, very clear. We have stated that we do not want any forced evictions. We do not want anybody to be forcefully moved from the Gaza Strip. At the same time, if there are people who voluntarily want to leave and they have a country that is willing to accept them, then that's a different conversation, a different story. But we certainly do not want to forcibly remove anybody.
They are moving because, listen to, we see the pictures, a 14-year-old girl with cerebral palsy who depends on a wheelchair told her fleeing family, leave me here, because she was crawling and felt she was slowing them down. That should evoke the sympathy of anybody.
We've allowed, and not only allowed, we facilitated the exit of many, many Gazans for medical treatment, including children with cerebral palsy. And we certainly want to work with other partners and other countries.
There is a spirit now that
those
attacks
Gazans
age
who need
ranges
medical
from
attention.
10 to 18.
And UN says what's happening now has horrific humanitarian consequences. What's your sense of what UN is saying?
As I said, the horrific consequences are on Hamas, and it is Hamas that needs to release the hostages and lay down their.
All right, looks like we've lost communication. I'm sure he's still there, but we've lost communication. All right, I'm gathering now that Michael is still there. Continue with what your line of thought.
Well, as I was saying, Israel does not want a humanitarian crisis, and in fact, we have not limited any humanitarian aid. Over the past weeks, we have seen thousands of tons of humanitarian aid going into Gaza, of food going into Gaza, of all other things that are necessary there. Those Gazans that have asked to leave and have got medical reasons, we have worked with partners to help facilitate Gazans who wish to leave the Gaza Strip for medical attention. And certainly the people of Gaza are not our enemies. Our enemy is Hamas, and this war is against Hamas. And we want to make sure that Hamas is defeated forever, that we release our hostages, Hamas lays down their arms, and we have a better future, not only for Israelis, but for the Palestinians living in Gaza as well.
Before I let you go, Michael, World's leading association of genocide scholars has declared that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza.
Well, that organization, unfortunately, is a farce. It's an organization that if you pay $30, you can join. If you have a look through some of the names that are as part of this organization, you'll see there's somebody called Adolf Hitler from Palestine. There are people called the Cookie Monster from different areas. It's not a serious organization. Tomorrow, or even today, you and I can both join this organization if we're willing to pay $30 and be considered genocide experts. Clearly, it's not a serious organization. It's not a serious bunch of scholars. And even those people who are in there have said that passing this motion, the organization breached its own guidelines. It didn't hold a proper discussion. It didn't hold a proper vote. And only a small minority of members even voted on this. So once we understand what this organization is, who they are, you understand that their vote is not worth anything, because the reality is that there is no genocide. There is no genocide in Gaza. Israel is conducting a war, and it's an absolutely outrageous accusation to make that accusation that is not based on any fact whatsoever.
Michael Freeman, Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, thank you so much for being on The World.